Good evening, guys. Mayuresh Joshi here, along with my colleagues Rushit, Vakar, and Rajshekar. Can you hear me? So if you can give me a few thumbs up or anything of that sort. So that should be good. Super. All right. Thanks, guys. So let's start without further ado. So thank you very much. I think this is one more initiative that we have started off with at William O'Neill India. So we already do the pre-opening show in the morning, and now we are running this show called as After Hours. So the intention is to equip all our users, our patrons with what is happening into the markets before opening, and probably just take a post-market analysis at the end of the day, or try to decipher the setup that looks forth from the next trading day or the week's action as well. So anything that you're probably mentioning in terms of stocks, again, as a clear disclaimer from a compliance perspective, no buy or sell recommendations here. It's just purely educational and meant for taking us up on the learning curve. Rushit, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so what we've probably seen over the last few days, weeks, months, right? Action has been terrible as far as gauging an everyday move on the market is concerned. So since the initial signs were flashing on the market itself in terms of more distribution days, largely in a downtrend, after that, tried to pick up some steam, again got broken down. But again, I think we're trying to get back to our feet. So the rally attempt that you're probably in at this point of time is largely dependent in terms of global cues. What comes out today evening, specifically from the US market, in terms of their GDP, the consumer data yesterday was very, very poor. And therefore, the estimates in terms of the GDP number, the GDP print, the expectations of the Fed action, which is clearly as a path laid out that 75 bips might happen in this month's or in July month's policy as well, followed by one more 75 and then probably 50 and then 50 as well. So I think the interest rate curve is clearly stifling demand. Reading through in terms of inventory built up on the US market, the kind of con calls that we've got and attended from our US team to the likes of Walmart, Amazon's, Nike's, inventory is clearly building up. Demand is coming off as reflected in yesterday's data as well. And because of higher interest rate hikes, you're probably seeing even the mortgage or the housing demand fall off and prices come off as well. So I think whether it's going to be a soft landing, whether you're going to actually fall into recession, I think that's an unknown at this point of time. And markets really don't like unknowns. Uncertainties is something that the market will not like. And therefore, the kind of reactions that you're probably seeing is a testimony to that. On the other hand, if you probably look at the bond yields, which also reflect a large part in terms of equity market action, both globally and as far as our Nifty and Sensex is concerned, bond yields have started moving higher, even on the 10-year in the US and the 10-year in the Indian context as well. Rupee has been depreciating. So to a large extent, I've always been asked these questions that service-oriented sectors obviously benefit a lot. But what really happens is that a lot of IT companies, and I was having a look in the past week on a lot of transcripts in terms of the hedging policy that IT companies do, specifically against the dollar, because a lot of their clients are positioned out of the US. The hedge is probably at a lower level in terms of your net buying and selling prices as far as the exchange rate is concerned between the INR and the USD. So I think a large part of any further depreciation will not incrementally benefit IT companies. So let's be clear on that. So just a falling rupee does not mean that IT companies should start moving incrementally. And with the kind of recessionary drawbacks or pullbacks that we are seeing, I think discretionary spending, if it comes off, order books can get constrained. A large element, again, in terms of the Nifty move has been that it has been range bound for a large part of the past week. Tomorrow is expiry, so I think expectation again largely built in 15,700, 15,800. But technically, I think if you look at what Rushit is drawing right now, right, I think the kind of candle that has been formed on a 5-minute time frame, if you probably look at our time frames put on a 5-minute, you can probably understand what is actually happening into the market as well. So you're probably looking at some element in terms of volume selling coming at the end of the day. If you probably look at all the trading sessions in the past week as well, not allowing the Nifty to probably go higher. And therefore, range-bound trade for this week might continue. But what is largely happening, again, a little bit technical on this front, it might be a tweezer top formation. So what a tweezer top basically does on a monthly chart formation is it probably has a range bound action, but I think with the reversal that probably comes into the candle with the strong pullback that we see, that can actually correlate or relate back to a bearish formation if it has to happen in the market. So I think what happens tonight in the US and the expiry tomorrow, once the expiry is done, will largely dictate how the market will probably move from Friday and for the coming week as well. So now it remains in a rally attempt, but whether we come down, what has happened on the Nasdaq yesterday, right? We did see a follow through day on Friday, but immediately in a couple of days, I think you did see a distribution day come through. If the data is bad today and we see one more, there might be some elements of doubt in terms of how sustainable this follow through day that was witnessed in the US market might continue. And if US starts coming off again, I think global markets, including our market, will probably be. Lucian, if you want to take to the next slide. So a quick snapshot on what happened in today's action. A lot of the upstream companies, because Brent moved at the beginning of the day around 118, it's somewhere around 117 quarter at this point of time, showed significant movement. If you look at the advanced decline ratio, again, far more declines at this point of time. The red bar that you're seeing on the red color on that candle is far larger. But I think the mix was more in terms of these large caps, ONGC, NTPC, Reliance, probably moved higher. Announcement in terms of Akash probably taking over the reins at Geo, and expectations of a bumper number in the oil and gas segment, because Singapore GRMs have gone through the roof. They actually touched $30 a barrel. They have cooled off. If I was looking at the data yesterday and today, almost $24, $25 a barrel, but significantly higher. And therefore, with RIL having options of multiple feedstock with them, there is a huge probability of bumper numbers coming in on oil and gas reopening, which means retail should benefit. ARPUs, we have already seen significant accretion happening in the last quarter. Expectations of more price hikes and a debt-free balance sheet means that with further ARPU increases, if any, might lend a huge amount of operating leverage on the telecom balance sheet. The losers, again, typically spread across banks. Banks Nifty was largely a weakish link in the overall move for the market itself. Bank Nifty is not performing, and therefore I think the Nifty is moving in the fashion that it is moving in the past week, as far as this monthly and this weekly expiry is concerned, which happens tomorrow. So I think a large part of the losers were from vivid spaces, Axis Bank from the banking space, HUL from FMCG, Apollo Hospitals from the hospital space, and from the life insurance, HDFC Life has been a perennial laggard over the last few months and quarters as well. Next slide. So the Union Cabinet during market hours approved the deregulation of sale of domestically produced crude oil, which basically means that the retailing of crude oil is probably expected to take place. And there is complete deregulation. So I think it is clearly linked to markets. And therefore, I think the kind of move, what Rushit was showing in the previous slide, right? ONGCs, the Oil Indias, the Hindustan Oil Corporations, exploring corporations of the world, the upstream started moving because there will be freedom. Now, what I have read through market sources, and if you go to any retail pump, right, operated by Reliance's, the Adani, so on and so forth, the price is relatively higher because they are actually having a free market price linked mechanism. If this is the choice that is probably given, I think this should be beneficial. Whether it will feed into inflation, if oil prices go through the roof, there is a high possibility. But let's see how this entire linkage happens in terms of crude prices moving, how they move. There have been vivid targets laid out by a lot of brokerages, anything ranging from 140, 150, somebody is saying 100. But I think a broad range that has got established between 105, 108, 120, if that probably remains, you're probably expected to see with this move, upstream companies' prices move tad bit higher, at least having some element in terms of pass-through, and under recovery is probably coming off. Next slide, and I'll ask Rushit, Pakar, and Rajshekar to chip in.
Thanks, Mayuresh.
I want to add something. Yeah.
So yes, as discussed by Mayuresh, like today's action was, after a gap down opening, there was a very good recovery. And I think this is the second day, Maverick, when this 15,700, and if you look over here, the pink line, that is the 10 EMA. So a very short term moving average, but yes, I think in this markets, these are a bit working. So again, 10 EMA had given a support today also, very close to that level. And I think from there, the rebound was very good. But again, I think as Mayuresh discussed, last hour mein high volume pe selling. And what should be noted today is that since last 2, 3 days, 4 days, the volume was very low. Over here, if you can see, that was below average volume, but I think today's candle is not updated over here. But if you will look in this evening, today's volume was almost above average volume. So that's the problem. Moving in a narrow range on above average volume, not a great sign. But let's see, I think that this is what the next slide indicates, that the key event we need to look before tomorrow's market opening is the US GDP data. And so yesterday's few consumer data were not that encouraging. But if we see today, there is a major problem in the US GDP data, then market might give up in the at night in the US market, and following the global cues, we might open a bit on the lower side. However, if we see that the data is quite well and there is no major sign of still deterioration in the US GDP, and it's according to the expectation, then I don't think there might be a major problem going into the tomorrow's session. So if you look at the interesting part, the chart of the day, and so today we have selected Adani Transmission. The two key reasons. Firstly, there was a very good, consolidation just above its 200 DMA. So again, this is not a advice to buy or sell. I think we started the webinar we started the after hour by saying that it's just for the educational purpose. The red line, if you can see over here, uh, is the 50 DMA, and look at how well Adani Transmission reclaimed its 50 DM, and that's after a very long time. It was struggling to move around below the 50 DMA for a very long time. 200 DMA ke around consolidate kiya. And one learning that you can learn from here is, you can see over here, यहाँ पे भी 50 DMA को reclaim किया था, but गेन सस्टेन नहीं हो पाया. द रीजन बीइंग दिस, यहाँ पे अगर आप वॉल्यूम देखें तो काफी कम वॉल्यूम था, एंड दैट इज व्हाट वी डोंट लाइक. यहाँ पे तो थर्ड स्टेज का बेस था. दिस वाज अ थर्ड स्टेज बेस, cup base formation. So if you can divide it into two, that's the left and right side of the base. Right side में accumulation था, but volume अच्छा नहीं था. And you can see left side में जब stock गिरा तब volume was on the little on the higher side. So this is what some minute details you should start looking now. And if you look over here, there was a very good consolidation, some churning you can say. And what I have learned from the reading William O'Neill is that whenever the market is going lower, and if your stock is holding a particular level, और वहां पे churning होता है. Churning means high volume पे around similar level पे वो close होता है और एक level को hold करता है. Then something has happened over here कि हाँ, volume तो above average ही थे since last few weeks, and when the market was very volatile and moving lower since last 3, 4 weeks, the stock was just trading around its 200 DMA in a very tight region. So do not, some of you might be aware about the tight region formation. So please do not get confused with this. So this can be called the churning. And अगर आज देखें तो 50 DMA reclaim किया, there was a very strong action. Closing near the day's high, the action was strong. The relative strength, this is what I am discussing, the relative strength line that is trending higher. And the main thing, volume ka action tha. So it was a not only just price action, but volume action was also very positive. And see, this relative strength line holds very important. अगर हमारे last दो articles आपने पढ़े होंगे, there also we discuss a lot about the relative strength, and we have given a full list of around 30-40 stocks that are holding well in the current market, जिसका relative strength अच्छा है, and they have potential to do well when the market turns higher. So you can get that in the from our website, or even we can post it over here in the chat box as well. Rucha, if you can post our latest articles in the chat box, so you can just read through that. And yes, from tomorrow we will try to include those lists also. कि which are the stocks that are moving higher on the relative strength line, कौन से stock है जो ऐसा key averages को reclaim कर रहे हैं, and the accumulation distribution rating. So I think this was the first episode of After Hours, and so maybe Raj Vakar, you want to add something, or should I conclude?
No, so a couple of pointers, guys. What Rushit was saying in terms of the RS strength, right? And I was just discussing with Rushit, Vakar, and Raj as well. I was actually looking at the past videos of IBD of earlier bear market and bear market rallies as well. And very prominently, I think two things came out. One, I think in terms of the curated lists that we've got, right? The curated lists in terms of the RS line specifically. So the RS line trending higher. I think have a look at that list, guys, because that list is having a potential when markets are consolidating in a range to reflect and throw out ideations which can actually do well in bear markets. And a lot of earlier IBD webinars have actually pointed that out, that have a look at those new, the stocks in those curated lists where RS lines are hitting new highs. The second list that also comes to my mind is are up on volumes, right? So if you go to our app or our site, there is an up on volume which comes through, and there is an entire list, and we'll start doing that tomorrow as well. In that list, I think have specific elements in terms of which stocks are holding out for a couple of days, which are coming near pivot. And if that list on up on volumes is also matching with the list in terms of the near buy or the near pivot or breakout from weekly basis, fulfilling most parts of the canceling criteria, a lot of these stocks can give good movement in terms of a positional trade kind of a perspective. So to point it out, again, a disclaimer, not to buy or sell, but I think a few stocks which did well from that list itself, right? M&M was reflected in that list a few, maybe 7-8 days back. Before that, up move started happening. PM Industries has prominently got displayed in that list. You've seen names like a Maharashtra Seamless, which have got reflected. You look at the action on Rajratan Global. That was part of the list over the past couple of days as well. In today's list, I think auto ancillaries are doing exceptionally well, right? 200 DMA nikal diya hai. The index is moving higher. Rushit briefly mentioned, Ashok Leland mentioned a few stocks in our morning stuff as well. So I think within that, Minda Corp is also coming up, not close to the pivot, but it is taken out is 50 DMA. So have a look at that list, study that list in terms of stocks making new, where RS lines are making new highs, because that is what has got reflected in our past so many decades of bear market studies in our IBD webinars or our William O'Neill webinars US and the studies that they have done. That they normally reflect good positional trades if they happen. But please study that. Study what our learnings are in terms of the canceling criteria, and therefore, accordingly, you can probably take a judgment on it.
I think maybe Mayuresh, the participants can today, study about the relative strength, our learning articles, and that they get in the website. And tomorrow, at the same time, today, like we can discuss the list and few of the stocks, like me, Vakar, and Raj. We can discuss some stocks. So just try to learn about the relative strength, and so this will be a better exercise. So tomorrow, when you get back with few basic learning of relative strength and how it's helping. So then we will come up with the list and we will try to discuss few stocks as well as the groups that are improving in the relative strength.
Perfect. Yeah. So Bhaskar, I think I got your query on the chat. We'll try to do that. I'll forward it to the product team. Let's see how fast or how feasibly we can address your question on that. So with this, I think, guys, we will call it an end to today's post-market. Hope you guys join us every day. We'll try to make it very, very interesting every passing day. Today was just the opening part. But from tomorrow, I think we'll add a few more elements that will be very, very interesting and where we can discuss a lot of more things as well. Thank you so much, guys. You take care.